number 11. Howsoever men approach me, even so do I satisfy them. Men tread my path in all ways, O Partha. The second topic, verses 11 to 18. Talks about the relationship with action. What is God's relationship? What is self-relationship with action? Men tread only my path in all ways. Meaning, whatever path you do, I am there to, I support that. That's what he is saying. Whatsoever the path, then howsoever men approach me, even so do I satisfy them. So, first thing about action. What is the God's relationship with action? Action as in that which drives the action and that which enlivens the action. So, action, karma, has two components. One, that which drives it. Another is that which enlivens it. That which drives the action is vasanas. He is not the one who is driving the action. Actions are driven by vasanas. So, when it comes to action, two important things has to be understood. One is it that which drives the action. Another is that which enlivens the action. So, when he says, I support, he means the enlivening fact. Minus the enlivening factor, no movement is possible. But the individual movement is caused by the vasana. The individual movement, the individual attainment, the individual actions is driven by the vasanas only. But that which enlivens it, that which gives vitality to it, that which gives life to it is the self. So when he says, whatsoever people do, whatsoever actions that is happening, I am there in it. I am there. For without me, no action is possible. What a relief it is. For all can be, the entire responsibility can be put on him now. Because he is saying very clearly, I am there in all actions I am there. He is not saying only in good actions I am there. He is saying in actions I am there. Meaning it can be a good action, it can be a bad action, it can be an indifferent action. Nevertheless, I am there in all. From this you derive the formula. What? One is the enlivening factor, another is that which drives the individual action. Why he talks about the enlivening factor? For talking about the enlivening factor seems to be so. Talking about the vasanas, modification, changing, all that seems to be more useful and beneficial. What is the point in talking about? Enlivening factor, what is the What is the meaning? And of the 700 verses of the Gita, 500 verses, he talks about the enlivening factor only. And whenever he talks about the enlivening factor, we have a difficulty in relating to that. For when you talk about a vasana, it is very interesting in relating to a vasana. Meaning, you change it, you can do something, you should not be doing something else. All this is very agreeable, all this is very pleasant to the ego. The moment the enlivening factor comes in, your ego has no role there. The ego has nothing to do in relation to the enlivening factor. When your ego has nothing to do with it, what is the general attitude? Indifference. Correct. Indifference. That is why we become indifferent to. That is why you are indifferent to the self. For if you have to pay attention, means your ego has to get. If your ego is not getting involved, you can never pay attention to anything. Or in fact, it is the ego seeking the satisfaction drives all attention, all actions. So as far as whenever he talks about the enlivening factor, where the ego has nothing to do. Number one. Number two, ego cannot relate to the enlivening because the enlivening says, you are powerless by yourself, you are powerless. It is me giving power. How can you agree to that? How can any ego accept that something is giving power where it is extremely or fully powerless? That is why it's called enlivening. Enlivening means by itself it has no power. Something comes and gives power to it, and borrowing that power, using that power, you do action, and you take credit for that action. Arrogation as in doing, credit as in the fruit. Credit as in the fruit, arrogation as in the doing. As far as actions are concerned, there are always two things. One is the fruit. You take credit to the fruit. Credit in the sense of positive or negative. Positive means there is a positive credit, you feel joy. Negative means there is a disappointment. So either way, the action, the result has this effect, or the arrogation in doing. Enlivening factor comes and says, these two has your arrogation also has no meaning. The result also has no meaning, because if I do not enliven, what can you do? We turn back and say, the ego turns back and says, I do everything. The enlivening factor comes and says, you are not the doer. You are not the doer is meaningful only when liberation is the goal. When liberation is not the goal, you are not the doer has no meaning. That is why most of the verses are so difficult. Upanishads are almost impossible to even identify with, because liberation is not the goal. Moksha is not the goal. Liberation is not the goal. When the subject matter is moksha, and when I am not interested in moksha, and when I come and approach this, nearly 80-85% will not be interesting only. Yes. It is like this. The person goes to engineering college to study engineering, but calculus and trigonometry is not interesting. But wanting to study engineering, he will study engineering, but he will not know engineering. For there is a goal, and there is something that is essential for that goal. What is the goal? Liberation is the goal. For that, this is essential. Supposing if you say liberation itself is not the goal, or I am still considering whether to pursue liberation or not. Any discussion about enlivening factor, any discussion about the I will become so redundant, will become so meaningless, will be so unimportant, uninspiring, whatever be it. Because it is relevant or it is meaningful only when the goal is set. Krishna's problem is he's driving Arjuna to move towards that goal. When he is driving Arjuna to move towards that goal, so many things he says which we find very useful in the worldly functions also. But the intent, the purpose is not that. What is the purpose? Liberation is the goal. And if you want liberation, first thing is not to identify with action. If you want liberation, first thing is not to identify with action. All actions, good action as well as bad action. Or you have identified with your actions in the past, that is why you are where you are with so much of vasanas. Now, having created that, if you continue to identify with action, what are you creating? More vasanas. And necessarily vasanas, which is what the first 10 verses, the knowledge part he has already explained. You create vasanas, you necessarily will be affected by sukha and dukkha. You necessarily will be affected by sukha and dukkha. Sukha will excite, dukkha will be painful, whatever it is. I am not going into that again. But as long as you identify with action, what you have to necessarily experience, the consequences of the action. What are the consequences of action? Sukha and dukkha. So what if we experience that? So what if these are the consequences? So what if a person experiences sukha and dukkha? There's nothing wrong about it. You will be perpetually caught in this cycle. You will be caught in this cycle. So liberation is recognizing the cycle. Liberation means recognizing that you are caught in this cycle. Liberation means asking for how to get out of the cycle. And liberation means ready to do anything to get out of the cycle. Exactly the opposite. Exactly opposite is the vasanas. So whenever he talks about the enlivening factor, he is giving what is the goal, what is the path, and what is it that you have to do. What is it that you have to do, the starting point, not to identify with action. An ego cannot do an action if it doesn't identify. That is why the training is obligatory action. That is why the training, the starting point of the spiritual training is obligatory action, because ego cannot do action without an identification. Without an identification means the very cheap technique is flattery. And 100% it works. All other techniques works only 98-99%. Flattery works 100%. Even if the person says, I don't get flattered, now that fellow is flattered already. He's flattered already. Then only he says, I don't fall for flattery. Now he has already fallen for it. Or he is saying, it's not enough. That's what it means actually. It's not enough to see. That's why we talk about inspirational statements, motivational statements. You know, what is all that? What is the psychology behind all that? What is the psychology behind all inspiration, motivational talks? Why nothing of it is working? Why nothing of it is working? Because it boosts the ego. And the easiest way to boost the ego is that. I am so dependent. There are 100 people ready to do this. I am giving you a chance. Would you want to do it? Na? The ego says, அவ்வளவு பேர் இருக்கிறாங்கல்ல அவங்க வச்சுங்க. No, யாருமே only you. Where does this come from? Identification with the action. So from the root he says, it is meaningless to identify with the action, because by yourself you can't do. If I don't enliven, I have a Upanishad story. Agni comes and Brahman asks Agni, what? What do you do? You remember the story, no? An Upanishad story. Agni comes. I am Jata Vedas, he says. I am Jata Vedas means I am all over. I know everything. Oh, very good. What do you do? I burn everything. Then he said, and what Brahman did? What Brahman did? Or blade of grass. And he said, burn it. Agni couldn't burn. Accepting the defeat, Agni went back. Very, very important, very, very, very essential step is to agree, is to accept that defeat. Agni accepted the defeat and went. Just that is only one aspect, no. And then another god came. Who was the next god? Vayu came. I blow up everything. Then he said, move this. Then he said, okay, you move everything, but move this blade of grass. And Vayu couldn't move. Humbled, accepting the defeat, Vayu also goes back. Saying, meaning, you don't have Agni is burning. Vayu is that which is blowing. Individual action. Only they do that. There's not something else is coming and doing that. But if the enlivening factor isn't there, Agni can't do what it has to do. Vayu can't do what it has to do. We can't do what we are doing. Therefore, who is the actual doer? Who is the actual doer? I am the doer, he says. I am the doer. Whatsoever actions are happening everywhere, who is doing all that? I am doing all that. Not only I am doing all that, everybody is using me only. All are using me, but credit is not given to me. They use me and they take credit. Yeah. I did it. Now who's the actual doer? Brahman is the actual doer. Then you can't take any credit. The distinction of good and bad, the distinction of right and wrong, the distinction of actions is not of the self. It is not of the self. To put it very simply, what he is saying is, I support the criminal and I support the sage who is sitting and meditating to realize the self. I am the one who is supporting all this. Then it is not God at all. God means Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha duskritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge. Two verses before he said, but Sunday கேட்கறதுனால we forget, we don't connect like that. How can you say that when just 2 verses before you said that, and other explanation we gave, and for this another explanation for this. What is the self relation to action? Whenever they talk about self relationship to action, they are talking about how you should relate to action. Whenever they talk about self relationships with action, means what you have to understand from that? How you should relate to action. How does it work? Because you are the self. Since you are the self, might as well start relating to action in the way that I relate to, he says. Since you do not know that, I am explaining to you. Learn this, like how I relate to action. Arjuna, you also start relating to action and get into what? Get into fight. Get into fight. The merit of the demerit of the action doesn't affect the enlivener. The merit or the demerit of the action affects the one who has identified with the action. The merit or demerit affects the one who has identified with the action. A doer is bound to be affected by the doing. It is impossible that a doer comes and asks, how not to be affected by? How not to be affected? A doer can never ask this question. A doer can ask this question, but answer will be given, but it will not be of any use to him. Why? Because doer means affectation. Doer nale affectation. I want to be the doer and how not to be affected. That is not possible. So either you ask yourself, you want to be affected or not. If you want to be affected, continue identifying with the doing. Continue to identify with the doing. What does identification with the doing means? What is identification with the doing? I am the doer. I can only, whatever comes with it. This is what identification with the action. And as long as you identify with the action, you will be affected. What is that affectation? What is affectation? Sukha and dukkha. That is first layer of affectation. That is first layer. What is the secondary layer? What is the second layer of affectation? More vasanas. Right. Third layer of affectation. More birth. Okay. Next layer. There is a consequence to everything. I am asking, you say it. When you say that, you should understand there is a consequence to it. What is that? Okay, more, craving for the fruit. Right. Craving for the fruit. More vasanas, craving for the fruit, more births. Attachment. What is the consequence of all this? No liberation. Correct. What is the consequence of all that? Helplessness, despair. Can't come out of it. Futility. Bondage. Inactive. That one word will not come. That one word will not come. Because all these words that we speak arises from our memory of what we have heard in the past. That one word will not come. Ignorance. Boosting the ஒரு வார்த்தை சொன்னா sentence. Okay. All these indicates that you can never concentrate. All these indicates that you can never be in the present. A person who is affected by vasanas, what is the Why is it that they are so concerned about all this? Not because you have sukha, not because you have dukha. Idella superficial layer of understanding. But then, the sukha and dukha and all will have no meaning now. This talk about the sukha and dukha and all has no meaning because more and more and more we are tending to forget what? We are tending to forget what dukkha is. Whatever the temperature outside is, you come inside, it is so pleasant to know. Where is the dukkha? So where are we trying to experience? Where is the dukkha of life at all? So all that we think is, make it more. So dukkha can, so to talk about sukha and dukkha and all is of no meaning nowadays. In the Shastras gives the example of the pain of action. They give the example of the pain of action. Today, we have to talk about depression as, today we are talking about depression and the rest. We are not talking anymore about the pain of action because we have discovered so much of machines where actions is not painful at all anymore. So all the examples, all that they talk about is so redundant nowadays. But something more dangerous we are talking. At least they talk about the pain of action. They never said you will have a sleepless night. Today we have to talk about sleepless nights only, not to talk about the pain of action. So aduketa madiri examples konjam so we modify the examples. What is the root cause for all this? The root cause for all this is, always remember this, spiritual evolution is determined by the ability to concentrate. Spiritual growth is determined by the ability to concentrate. Concentration is an indicator of your desires under control. Concentration is the indicator. That's why we have to understand this as the consequence. The sight of it is so tempting. Some of the people have seen, the moment the meeting starts, they put the mobile phone like this, no? I don't know whether you have observed. Why they do that? Because it disturbs. It means lack of concentration. Now I can put the phone down, but then the urge says, something important would come out. Something important is going to come up. Something important is going to come up means the important which is the present is not correct. Scholarly, correct. Very true. Which we don't understand as a problem at all. Which we don't understand as the problem at all. Why we don't understand as the problem at all? Because so much driven by identifying with actions and so much caught up in, so much caught up in that, what is missed? What is missed? The present is missed. When you miss the present, you are creating when the present is missed, you create your future. That's why we go on creating for the next 20 years. Now you have created for the next 20 years. Up to my grandchildren, now you have created up to your grandchildren. Supposing if you can create up to 7 Janmas, na, you will create up to that also. You follow? All boils down to the worry, the anxiety, the vasanas increasing, the identification. All this is of only one. What? All this is the result of only one. What? What is the cause? The cause is the mind not staying put. Mind not staying put. And if you have to stay put the mind, your ego has to be. If in today, as the human being is today, the only way to make the person concentrate, the only way to make the person do anything, the only way to make the mind stay put in the action is either by something material or something psychological. Something psychological is without you it can't be done. Oh, then there is or material. Both are not the right method. On what basis we say both are not the right method? Both are not the right method. Why do we say both are not the right method? The consequences prove it. What are the consequences? Depression. At least 30 years back, 40 years back, stress is the word. Not today. Depression is the word. Stress is not the word anymore. See, depression is nothing but stress intensified. What is depression? Depression is not separate. And you know the definition of depression? You know the definition of depression? Depression means stubborn mind. Depression is nothing but a stubborn mind, which is not willing to yield, budge. I will not depression. That will lead to a state of inaction. Or I will do action only when either I have to be psychologically pampered or materially. Yes. Either there has to be a material benefit or psychological pampering. Either way, the end result is what? Sleeplessness. And then the question that is asked is, how to be happy, how to be peaceful. And that person cannot be peaceful. That person cannot be happy because at the core, at the root, there is an identification with the action. Either good or bad, it is the enlivener that is doing. I have nothing to do with it. If you understand that, straight away there is a relief. What is the relief? Did you follow what I said? If you understand, it is the enlivener that is responsible for the good and the bad, and I have nothing to do with it. Na? Straight away there is a relief. What is the relief? You are out of it. That's what liberation is. Bondage is you are in it is bondage. Liberation is you are out of it. I am out of this now. Other relief, no? What is the relief? What is the relief? The ending, the conclusion is the relief. Starting is always painful. The ending is far. Now, there is a relief. I have nothing to do with this anymore. Na? There is a relief. It means all this is what? Indicating liberation. All these are indicators of liberation. So what he says is, identify with it and start the practice now. Identify with it and start the practice now. All paths are the path of the self. All paths are my path only. You just have to do, and you have nothing to do with the consequences of it is the liberation. But our problem is we want freedom from the doing. He says freedom from the doing is not possible, but freedom from the consequences is possible. This is the whole technique of Karma Yoga. The entire technique of Karma Yoga is nothing but how to help a person to be free from the consequences of the doing, not from the doing. From the doing you can never escape, but you can be free of the consequences. It means you have to invoke a special technique. It means you have to bring in a special technique into the doing, so that you will not be affected by the consequences. What is that technique? That's what in the previous chapter he introduced. He explained the technique. Now he is going to continue with it. What is known as yajna karma. Yajna type of actions. The yajna type of actions alone frees you, liberates you from the consequences of the doing. Since people do not know how to liberate themselves from the consequences of the doing, they abstain from the doing itself, which Krishna says is not possible. For you can never abstain from the doing. Why you can never abstain from the doing? The momentum you have already gathered from the past. The momentum you have already gathered from the past, and if you don't act according to that momentum, you are only a you have already gathered momentum from the past, and if you don't act now, you are only being a hypocrite. The force is there, but you are not acting on that force. So first thing is established. What? Freedom from the doing is not possible, because you have already gathered momentum from the past. So freedom from the doing is not possible. But what is possible? Consequences is possible. That itself is a very big relief. That itself is a very big relief. For a sattvic person, For a tamasic person, it doesn't work. We are all talking about not to a tamasic person, this is. A tamasic person, you have to really give him something, make him feel responsible, make him feel as though everything is dependent on. These are all the techniques that you have to use to a tamasic person. To a rajasic person, you say, depression la vandrum, be careful. To a sattvic person, you say, penetrate. Where does the relief come from? Where does the joy come from? The joy comes from I am no more. I am no more. I am no more. In it, na? Whatever. I am. இது மந்த புத்தி கூட இல்ல, அதுக்கு கீழே இருக்கிற என்னவோ புத்தி இது. In it, I am not in it, na? What does it mean? The pain, the burden, you got relieved from. What is it that you got relieved from? That you say, Abba, I am free now. What is it? I am no more connected. Anyway, I have no more connection. The relief, actual relief comes from what? At what point the relief comes? The relief comes only from when you say, I have done it and no more. I have no more connection with it. That's why sannyas is bliss. That's why sannyas is true. That is why sannyas is the only true happiness. The sukha and dukkha is an excited state of mind, not happiness, not bliss. This is because the true bliss comes from saying, anyway, Bhagavad, all are, that umbilical cord is cut. What a relief that is. That relief comes when you have done it sincerely. The relief comes when you have done it sincerely. Supposing if you have not done it sincerely, you will feel very guilty, you will feel very bad. Not only you will feel guilty or very bad, you will feel lost. You will feel empty. What will I do now? You follow? When you are not ready for all this, this will not happen. Because immediately you will feel, what will? What will I do now? There is nothing to be done because there is no more fuel. There is nothing to be done because there is no more fuel. For what is the fuel? What is the fuel that is driving the action? Desire. What is it that caused desire? Vasanas. Another word for vasanas. Ignorance. நடுப்புற இருக்கிறதெல்லாம் விட்டுருங்க இப்போ. Erase everything. Action equals ignorance. You may not agree. We may not agree. That is our problem. But the law doesn't change, no. You follow? You remove all that. Action equals ignorance. And ignorance will necessarily have a consequence. What is the consequence? Ignorance will necessarily have the consequence. What is the consequence? Depression. அப்படி சொல்லணும். Ignorance will necessarily cause depression. அப்படின்னா, wherever you see anybody depressed, whenever you get into depression, you understand. What is the cause? Ignorance. Whose ignorance? அடுத்தவளோட ignorance. Not the ignorance of the partner, not the ignorance of the neighbor. Whose ignorance? You will relief. Because at least you have identified the source of the problem. At least you have identified the location of the problem. Again, ப்ராப்ளத்தை கண்டுபிடிச்சிட்டாலே பாதி ப்ராப்ளம் இஸ் சால்வ்டு. சிக்கல் எங்க இருக்குன்னு கண்டுபிடிக்கிறது பெரிய சிக்கல். கரெக்ட், இட்ஸ் ட்ரூ. டு லொகேட் த சோர்ஸ் ஆஃப் த ப்ராப்ளம் இஸ் த பிக்கஸ்ட் ஒன். And the source always lies in the problem. The source of the problem is in the problem. World says source of the problem is outside. Fundamentally, two ways of thinking. Source of the problem is in the problem. Now, one way of dealing. Source of the problem is outside. That is another way. And we are neither here nor there. Inside the classroom, source of the problem is outside. Raghu, correct. Outside the classroom, correct. Inside the classroom, source of the problem is actions born out of ignorance. Actions born out of ignorance. What actions? Sattama solluva. All actions. All actions are born out of ignorance. All actions are born out of ignorance. Because it necessarily produces a consequence. The enlivening factor, identifying with the self, doesn't create any of this. Because you have detached. What is the detachment? Doing happens, but I have no connection with this. Very difficult is to take this stance. You can't practice this stance. By repeated manana, you can. By repeated manana, by repeated reflection, by repeated hearing, repeated manana, repeated reflection, you can understand that. All actions born out of ignorance. What to do about the actions? What to do about the force that you have already created? What to do about the force that you have already created? Nothing can be done about it. You have to go through it. Other than they kept a fantastic word, prarabdha. They say this much. The prarabdha they say, no? Meaning the force is already created and you have to go through it. But one thing you can do, what? Not create. Adutha prarabdham create panama, you can act in such a way that you don't create the next. And if you go on creating the next, what is the consequence of it? If you go on creating it, what is the consequence of it? Romba depressing item. So use some other word. Whatever the word that you like. But nevertheless, the suffering is because of what? The identification. The doing doesn't cause that suffering. The identification causes that suffering. That is why You find the person who is detached does it effortlessly. The person who is detached does it effortlessly. The person who is not detached does it with lot of effort. Lot of pain. ரொம்ப பிரயாச அது கால் ரொம்ப எஃபர்ட் போட வேண்டியிருக்குது. ரொம்ப ஒரு 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 5 நிமிஷம் மைண்ட நிக்க வைக்கிறதுக்கு டு கீப் த மைண்ட் ஸ்டே புட் இன் a place for 5 minutes. அவ்வளவு பிரயாசையா? That much of effort is required. Why that much of effort is required is because the mind is running in so many directions and to stop it is that much difficult. You follow? Instead of stopping it through knowledge and understanding and the right technique, people stop it by the wrong methods. What are the wrong methods by which you can stop it? Either a material benefit you can give, and say, இதெல்லாம் பண்ணா கரெக்டா 25th salary will be credited. Now that is keeping. Or can't you see how many people are dependent? Without you, what will happen? What will I do? What will they do? What will all of us do? எல்லாரும் சந்தோஷமா இருப்போம். If you are not there, we all will be happy only. Either the movement of the mind is arrested only by creating further cycle. Creating another cycle. What is another cycle? Another cycle of bondage, birth and death in ultimate sense, even relatively speaking. But then the very fact that you have to go through it, the doing becomes painful. Why the doing becomes painful is because அடுத்த appraisal இப்போ இல்லையா? சேர்ந்த அன்னிலிருந்து இன்னி வரைக்கும் அதேதான். வேர் இஸ் த மோட்டிவேஷன்? கொஞ்சமாவது அப்கிரேட் ஆகும் இல்லையா? அப்கிரேட் ஆகிறோமா இல்லையா? ஆகல. Motivation. Where does the motivation comes from? It is not just that. Then it has to be added. The problem is not in the result. The problem is in that continuous addition that the mind wants. It's the continuous addition that the mind wants that makes it go insane, that makes it go mad. You follow? Punya karma pati pesna kuda, it has to be spoken as an increasing. All shlokas have the Palashruti, no? Palashruti means it talks about the benefits. That's why it's called Palashruti. Talks about the fruits. Ekakale paten nityam. ஒரு வாட்டி கூட சொல்லணும் என்ன ஆகும்? ரொம்ப டேஞ்சர். So if you say it, ஏககாலே பட்டேன் நித்தியம், ஒரு வாட்டி சொன்னா போருமா? ஆனா கொஞ்சம் ஜாஸ்தி வேண்டியிருக்குதே. தென் திகாலம்ய paten nityam. But then that is also not enough. Then trikalam yas paten nityam. As long as your demand is increasing, you have to keep doing this. This is samsara. This is what is known as samsara. The demand goes on increasing. As the demand goes on increasing, your doing also has to be increased. Okay. Why it is futile, why it is bondage, why it is ignorance is because, always remember this, the gap that causes pain remains constant. You can never do and get and match your demand. The gap always remains. And that gap that is remaining constant is that which gives constant dukkha, pain. To start with pain. A stage comes with இதனால பிரயோஜனம் இல்லை சார். ஏதோ பிரயோஜனம் இருக்கிறதுன்னு சொன்னாங்களே நம்பி ஆரம்பிச்சேன். சொன்னாங்க வேதாந்தா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் இன்ட்ரோடக்டரி லெக்சர்ல என்னெல்லாமோ சொன்னாங்கன்னு கேட்டுட்டு ஐ ஆல்சோ கேம். Now you can't go also. Neither can you go, neither are you in it. Huh? The gap that always remains is that which causes the pain. How do you know that the gap always remains? How do you know that the gap always remains? Little bit of your experience is enough. Little bit of reflection on your own experiences is enough. The thought of acquiring versus actual acquiring. What is more joyful? The thought. The thought of going on a holiday is more joyful than the actual holiday. The thought of buying a house is more joyful than actually living in it. Yeah. Now pigeons problem romba irukku. Pigeons are coming and disturbing too much. Yeah. அது வாஸ்துபடி பிஜன் எல்லாம் வேற வரக்கூடாதான். நெகட்டிவ் எனர்ஜி. Pigeons give negative energy. So அதுக்கோசரம் ஈகிளி அக்கூட்டு வச்சுக்க முடியும். பேசாம அங்கேயே இருந்திருக்கலாம். The pain always remains. Your own experience is the proof that the thought of you going to have it is joyful than the actual having. One. Second, the longevity of the joy versus the longevity of the pain. The longevity of the joy versus the longevity of the pain. The longevity of the good deed versus the longevity of the bad deed. You do something good and you do something bad. I do something good and I do something bad. The longevity of it. What is more long? You get a car, next morning 50% of the joy content is gone. Third month, pain. Accident it is got, somebody came and now odunga poyinundu. That fellow came and banged. I feel like banging that person's head. Dukkha comes in. Okay, if nothing has happened, you get bored with it. Okay, why talk negative, sir? Well, no accident, why talk negative? Nothing has happened. It is good with you. But then what happens? You get bored. It means somehow you will make sure that the gap is maintained. What is the gap? The gap that causes sorrow is maintained. Opposite of that is the right knowledge, the right understanding. Bodhonya sadhane yogi saksham mokshaika sadhanam. Knowledge is the direct means for liberation. Clear? கருத்துல ஏந்தா அதை சொல்லணும். ஏந்திரிக்கலன்னா சொல்ல தேவையில்லை. ஏந்தா you have to say what? Saksham bodhonya sadhane yogi saksham mokshaika sadhanam. Knowledge is the direct means for liberation. Because if ignorance is the cause, knowledge alone becomes the... If ignorance is the cause, knowledge becomes the solution. You follow? And as far as the action is concerned, what is the knowledge? Not the doer. When you are not the doer, obviously you will be liberated from the consequences of the doing. When you are not the doer, you will be liberated from the consequences of the doing. And as long as you believe that you are the doer, you will be affected by the consequences. Not only that, ignorance is that which maintains that gap. What is the gap? The gap of what you hope, what you wish, and what you want versus what you have and what you get. What you have is what you have gotten. Yeah. If this is what I have means this is what I have gotten. Therefore, what is avidya? What is ignorance? Ignorance is you want to bridge the gap and you want to get out of it, but you act in such a way that it is constantly maintained. This is why it is called, this is ignorance. You follow? This is called avidya. This is called ignorance. What is ignorance? You want to be free of that gap, but you act in such a way that the gap is maintained. And then the question that is asked is, question is common. What is the most common question? How to be happy, how to be happy, how to be peaceful. Even if nothing wrong happens to the acquisition, you will get bored with it. Are you able to follow? That is why you want to go to the next. The motivation to go to the next is because of the failure. What is the failure? You wanted something, you expected something, you hoped for something, but you ended up having something else. Right through the life, anybody's life, if you look at it, what is the problem? They hoped for something, they expected something, They wanted something, but they actually ended up getting something else. What you got is what you have worked for. Your hopes may be different. Your dreams may be different. But what you got is what you have worked for. This is the cruel law of karma. So you can never blame anybody for why I am stuck like this, I don't know, sir. Krishna will turn back and say, don't say you don't know. You are the one who caused it. You are the one who asked for it. You are the one who wanted it. Therefore it has come to you. This is the law of karma. How many times you hear this lecture, law of karma, it is still very elusive only. Still it's not very clear. This is the law of karma. What is the law of karma? What you are having now is what? You worked for. Don't say, I asked for it. No, because you will say, I didn't ask. No. What you have today is what you have worked for. You made all the efforts to get what you have today. If you understand it rightly, it is very liberating also. Because you know that tomorrow you can be free of it. But what to do about today? Just what to do about today? Just do it. Just go through it. So you cannot do anything about it as far as today is concerned. But something can be done about your tomorrow. Knowledge is always a preparation for tomorrow. You know that, no? When you go to primary school, is that knowledge for that day or for tomorrow? Knowledge is always a preparation for. Indulgence is for. Indulgence is now. Knowledge is a preparation for future only. That is why when you are gaining knowledge, it will always look painful, it will always look useless. Pillow says, no? You can never know it. For knowledge is a preparation for the tomorrow. Meaning, today, the momentum is already gained. The past momentum about which you can't do anything about, and you have to just accept it. From this law arose this concept called fate. Not in the way that people understand now. You have no freedom from it because it is. You have no freedom from it because it is your own. It is your own making. Ana இப்படி ஆகும்னு எனக்கு தெரியாது. I didn't know that this is where I will end up. Ignorance is not an excuse. எல்லாத்துக்கும் ஆன்சர் வச்சிருக்கீங்க சார். கம்பேஷனே இல்லாம knowledge is so cruel. You have an answer for. But I didn't know this is where it will end up. How can you not know? Buddhi is given. And you are supposed to start developing the buddhi from the very young age. இல்லையா? கல்யாணத்தன்னைக்கு தான் சார் அதுதான் பண்ணி வச்சாங்க அப்படின்னா what to do? இல்லையா? கல்யாணத்துக்கு முதல் நாள் தான் சார் சண்டே வந்து காயத்ரியில இனிஷியேட் பண்ணாங்க. what to do now? Don't worry, another next Janma you can start. So you have to start that knowledge is available in abundance, guidance is available in abundance. The faculty is there. The foolproof methods are all established. When you ignore all that, what will be the consequence of ignoring that? Suffering is the consequence of ignoring. And then come and ask what to do. Start from there. Since you have ignored that, and that is what has caused the problem, what becomes the solution? Start from there. எந்திரிக்காம உட்கார்ந்தே இருந்ததுதான் ப்ராப்ளம்னா வாட் இஸ் த சொல்யூஷன்? கொஞ்சம் முட்டிய கொஞ்சம் நெக்க கொஞ்சம் எந்திரிக்கணும். தட் இஸ் த சொல்யூஷன். அது you follow? What is it? The consequences. What is the consequence? The doing versus the consequences of the doing. You will be free from both when you identify with the enlivening principle. And I am that enlivening principle. Identify with me and act. Anyway, I am the root cause for all actions. How I am the root cause for all actions? If I switch off, Agni cannot burn. If I switch off, Vayu cannot blow. But Agni is responsible for burning. Vayu is responsible for blowing. But that which enlivens this is, and enlivener is very, very important. Why the enlivener is very important is because unless the enlivener is there, you can never get detached. Detachment is not possible without the enlivener. If there is no enlivening, where will you go? You will be moving from one ignorance to one manifestation of ignorance to another ignorance only. How can you be free from ignorance? You may be free from the problem of today, but you can never be free from problem as such. Liberation is freedom from creating problem. What is liberation? Today you have created so many problems. Nothing can be done about it. Go through it. Whatever obligations has to be done, do that. But you can prevent the future. How can you prevent the future? By knowing a technique by which problems itself will not get created. What is the problem? Vasana is the problem. What is the cause? Ignorance is the cause. You gain the knowledge from the root, you are eliminating it. What is it? Not identifying with the action. Not identifying with the action. But at least not identify with the fruit. அதுவும் முடியலையா? Not identify with, அதுவும் ஒண்ணுமே முடியாது சார். Nothing can be done. No? Your fate is sealed. Your fate is sealed. For what? To sorrow. At least I should be happy in suffering. I have asked for my suffering and I will be happy. That is also not possible. Therefore, can you be happy with suffering? That is also not possible, because your original nature will not allow you to be. Your original nature will not allow you that. It may be temporarily, you can hide it temporarily, but you can never be free of it. You can never be free from your nature. Since you can never be free from your nature, might as well, instead of postponing it, do it. Do it. Yeah.